Hello, everyone, and welcome back to OWL by the Numbers, keeping you updated and in the know for all things Fantasy Overwatch League. I am your host, Totally Drunk, and tonight on episode of 47, we have another heavy week of player movement, so I'll let you know who has gone where and for what reasons. And of course, it wouldn't be a week without some pretty, monumental shifts in certain teams, one of
It
which
is.
one of which kind of scurried away from Asia after losing two games, and tucked their tail between their legs, went to NA so they could try to beat up on lesser competition, only for all sorts of mismanagement, players going on strike, players refusing to play, all of the above with the Vancouver Titans. So we got a new look Titans roster that we are definitely going to be talking into. And of course, we are going to preview some of Week 15's marquee matches as we try to finally solve the puzzle that is the Asia region in the Overwatch League, which seems to be an ever growing Rubik's Cube. And I still don't know what to make of any of it at this point, Ramses. But, anyways, before we get into the news and introduce you to my co-host tonight, let me just quickly take a moment to thank everyone who is joining us tonight on Twitch for our live show, and of course thank all of our repeat listeners out there. So as you can tell, it is the two-man crew. Adonar is busy playing Apex because there was a major patch going on. He's a fairly large podcast to do because of that. Bob is off recording Overwatch League recap. So we got the two-man show. It is Ramses and Totally Drunk. Ramses, good to have you back on, brother.
Happy to be here. Sleepy day today, but well, not in Overwatch League news. It feels like every time stuff settles down a little bit with the news, we get another big bombshell thing that we have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
It was quiet for a couple of days, and all of a sudden, here's a huge balance patch that's coming, and then everyone looked at it and was immediately frustrated that Moira was still a decently viable character. So it's Overwatch is a weird place to be, but I am still immensely grateful I get to be on this show with you guys. And fantasy was a little bit. We're still waiting on some of the stats this week, which is going to impact how we look at certain things. But fantasy's in a weird position because the stable the stable schedules of the midseason tournaments or the May tournament, excuse me, makes it a lot easier to chart out which players you're going to play and to really look at matchups. If only we didn't see as much player movement and I guess lineup shuffling, it would be a little bit more straightforward for fantasy this week. But I think I hit solid like middle in almost all of the contests we played in this week that had scores. What about you?
Well, consider that the Saturday games on daily were completely messed up. I honestly don't know. But I will say on Sunday did not fare too well, just based off of the few contests that I was up on. Now that being said, what a world we're living in right now, where all of a sudden the Mayhem are a top 5 Overwatch League team.
Top five.
And, just looking at the current breakdown for the May tournament, there's a legit shot that the Mayhem could actually walk away with the top seed for the tournament. Like, what is going on? I feel like the script has just been completely turned upside down. I don't know if it's the case of like the pink and blue teams trying to just pick up the broken pieces of Runaway, and Yaki is just trying to run with the flag at that point since he's one of the only survivors from any inception of Runaway at this point. But it's
Poor Kaiser.
it is just such a crazy sight to see, and good for the Mayhem, who had always kind of just been pegged on like that lower echelon of the Overwatch League franchises, to all of a sudden kind of like you know steering the ship in the right direction, rewriting the script altogether. So, you love to see it. It's a good turnaround for that team in particular. But unfortunately, with that, it also means that there are a number of teams right now who are still kind of searching for answers. And, one of them, Ramses, is, a team that we had moderate expectations for, but now they're without their star caliber DPS in the Washington Justice. So, what's been going on with this team? Because there's been a lot of movement here as of late.
So earlier this week, or not this week, I'm sorry, last week before the games, Corey, DPS player for the Washington Justice, best hit scan in North America, made the announcement that he was going to be retiring from Overwatch to pursue an esports career with Valorant. And I look at this a little bit differently than a lot of the other retirements we've been getting,
Mm-hmm.
where you have several people, Sinatra, uh, Stratus, even a little bit, like we'll get to, both of the retirees from Paris, saying that the game wasn't as fun for them anymore and that they just felt stifled. And I'm sure that factored a little bit into Corey's decision, but he has explicitly said that he has wanted to go pro in CSGO or something very similar to it since he was really, really young. Granted, he's only like 19, so a couple of years ago. And he's he has said like this game feels made for me. It feels exactly what I want, like what I want to do, and I think they like this is what I need to pursue. You could make the argument that he's going really early, and I think he is going really early because we're still figuring out Valorant isn't even out of beta yet, and teams are still being put together. So I feel both different ways on it because this is another guy that, like Sinatra, US like Overwatch put a lot of marketing and like advertising around Corey.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about it on Push the Point that if you got Cheez It Grooves with that were like the win a trip to the Overwatch League Grand Finals, you could get one of 3 signed player trading cards, and the 3 of them were Jonak, which please let Jonak stay in the Overwatch
Yeah,
League.
he's the only one where Reaper hasn't gone through that door at this point.
Jonak, Sinatra, and Corey. So it makes sense. I would say it's early. But the guy's really freaking good at Valorant. I don't know if you've seen that stream clip that keeps making the rounds, but he's really, really good. And it's a retirement. I feel like if Overwatch were in a very healthy place, I could still see him making this change.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Well, I feel like we're kind of like at this point now where there's a very big ongoing discussion about the state of Overwatch, primarily when it comes to hero pools and how that has basically affected how the game is played, how teams are preparing for their upcoming matches on such a short amount of time that it's basically just kind of like going on a whim on what they expect to be the best for any given week. So it's definitely cut down on the overall amount of prep that is being done and really put a lot of pressure not just on the players but the coaching staffs as well. And for the most part, anytime we're seeing these players or these coaches stepping down or moving away to either other projects or other titles altogether, a lot of them keep pulling on that strain. So it seems like hero pools across the board. I feel like if you go on Reddit, a lot of people are like, oh, hero pools are like the best thing to happen to the game. But it's definitely had its ill effect on, competitive integrity of the game. And it's also caused havoc on, Fantasy Overwatch League because you don't quite know, sometimes who's going to be in the starting rotation for the teams. And there's a lot of situations where there is player handcuffing and going on where you might only get 2 out of the 3 maps from one of your star DPS that would have likely had played 3 maps altogether there in the past. Now, for Corey, I can't say I'm too surprised. It does seem like Valorant for him is going to be more at home with what he's looking for, and it's kind of like a combination of the two. But, right now for Washington, this is a team that's constantly been a step behind pretty much the vast majority of the Overwatch League this season. And now all of a sudden you are in a position where you only have Tuba as your only DPS right now. So clearly they got to go out and they got to, sign a new addition. Whenever they're going to announce that remains to be seen. We've seen teams go as late as, game day before announcing who they picked up. Looking at you, Vancouver. So I don't know who they're going to be pursuing because there have been a lot of LFT posts, which does include some of the former Titans players. There's also some pretty notable tier 2 names that have kind of been floating around here and there, like maybe like Wub from Sky
Mhm.
Foxes being a
Wub,
possible.
I think Tayo's the other one that I've heard being thrown around as well. I think Wub specifically, just because I think his Twitter persona right now kind of really indicates that he's going there. You touched on Stratus as well. We forgot to mention Stratus played his final game on Saturday for the Washington Justice, where it was announced that he was going to be transitioning, into more of a content creator role. Not 100% with the team. We don't know that. I think the initial announcements made it seem like that was going to be the case. And then so he asked him point blank on stream, it's like, now that you're going to be like moving as a content creator, are you going to be doing stuff with the Justice? And he goes, maybe. And there's an awkward silence for 5 seconds, and then they move on to the next question. And I don't blame him if he wants to kind of get away from the Justice for a while.
Mm-hmm.
This one is more. This one to me seems more like a response to the lack of homestands, which is going to factor into a couple of other retirements. And that Stratus is an entertainer first and foremost, and I think you can look at he's good at the game, but he wasn't as good as other people. He definitely was his best when he got to be that personality on stage for the fans, really hyping up the matches, or just everyone remembers him coming out with the sunglasses or him with the big socks out on the desk. So with the lack of homestand matches, it made kind of pushing through really hard for him. And I again, I get this one. It's a bummer and it's rough. I hope that as if you're Blizzard, like with all these big things coming up, I have hope that there's some sort of response from inside Blizzard to be working to make amends to limit more retirements, because it doesn't look good when there's like every single week that we have like that anybody has a show, there's another hole that we have to plug,
Mm-hmm.
that we have to talk about who else is retiring.
Yeah, and
And
unfortunately, like we don't know whether or not the like this is gonna stop. You know, it could just be a slow leak, kind of like throughout the season. You know,
I
kind
will put
of. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I will put money that Linkser is the next person to retire. if you go
I
through
I could definitely see that.
if you go through those those game like the Sinatra or Corey Valorant games of who's playing Valorant in these Overwatch stacks, it's always those two, Raucus, Baby Bay, Zachary. Zach's gonna go. Zach's 100% gonna go. He's been whining about this game for long enough. Trill and Linkser. When all you're doing is streaming Valorant like every single day, you're not scrimming, I'm pretty sure you're gonna be going to play that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
I
there is a whole lot of Justice DPS right now, and unfortunately, like Tuba's fantasy stock value right now has not been great even when he has been playing, because he's kind of been the move-in piece even when there was like a 3-man DPS rotation. So like even in a situation right now where he is a mainstay unless we see multiple sign-ins coming from the Justice here, going into this weekend, I don't know if this is going to be someone that we could really rely on. When you're looking at the Justice, yes, they are, you know, 18th, 19th in the league right now. So I feel like there are better options on teams that are, you know, kind of close to them in the standings. And honestly,
Yeah.
you know, we're going to be talking about the Titans here in a little bit and their restructure, but I was pleasantly surprised by some of the fantasy production we saw out of these
Mhm.
tier 2 promoted players from Second Wind, as they took the stage for the first time this season.
The bummer about this move with the Justice as well is that it's going to really hurt. I think it's going to really hurt Elevote's fantasy value, because it's not like he's getting any help out there. And it, same with Aim God, if you're still playing Aim God, just because with the lack of pressure that's going to be there from the DPS, I think it's going to be way harder for those guys to get the same points they were getting.
All right.
We had another retirement, which I think might have been the funniest one so far. Gray, the other support from the Paris Eternal, other flex support, excuse me, also retired. I didn't get to read his tweet longer, but his like retirement like announcement was just the same as Hips, but like with his name like posted on top of it and his picture posted on top. And I I think this is another guy going to pursue Valorant. I mean, we didn't think so about Hip, but Hip literally just competed in a Valorant tournament this weekend. So
Mm-hmm.
I, I think it makes sense. I am all in fantasy stock wise on Fielder. Give me Fielder. The guy gets a lot of kills, he gets a lot of healing, and he's working on 200 ping. So he's he's going to be more expensive in daily leagues for sure. But he is somebody who because of the way Paris play, where they're really aggressive, and he's always getting value against teams that are even really really good, like the Fusion. I am very comfortable playing him every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in regards to Fielder, though, due to the pain differential that he is playing on, I feel like right now I wouldn't put him in like tier 1 in regards to the support role. I would probably say he's like at the top of tier 2. So right now, when you kind of look at the landscape, I feel like, you still have guys like Shu, Izayagi, Crimso, Alarm, Shaz, Violet, all still, above him. So, like, those would still be your basically, like, week-to-week top starters. But Fielder is definitely making a case, but he does seem to be just a step behind those particular players, so just keep that in mind. And it's crazy just to see him posting 120 plus top 3 totals, knowing that he is playing on 200 pain. And when you compare that to, say, let's just say KSA, for example, from the Vancouver Titans, who is their new flex tank, who is playing from Saudi Arabia, who I I think that's
He's playing from
even.
Europe, I think.
Is he? Okay, I'm trying to remember
Because
if he was on higher pain or not.
He's on high ping, but he's in Europe right now, and I think he still
Okay.
has dual citizenship because he was playing for Raspberry Racers and he played for Young and Beautiful and a
Right.
couple like European contenders teams. So
Right.
it's
Just
still like a ping difference, but
yeah, out of the
so
two, Fielder has been the best option. On High Noon, he put up 122.75, which was pretty respectable. But still not quite top run on the ladder in there, but definitely someone to keep an eye on. So I would say for daily, definitely keep an eye on what his contract cost is. So if he's around like 14 or 15, it's a much more enticing option. I think 16 would basically be the cutoff point, I would say, for him in particular, just because beyond that, you can get some main supports that typically do around the same numbers production wise.
now the other retirement announcement we got today was that Brucein, the off tank for Boston Uprising, was quitting, and he has specifically said he's going to be pursuing Valorant. You weren't really affected by this too much if you're playing Brucein. It's because he was the only tank left on a draft royale board. So I the Boston Uprising brought Punk up from Uprising Academy, which I think you and I would agree we thought would have happened a year ago.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Before they brought up Mufin, before they brought up Brucein, like so it's happy for the guy, stoked that he gets to play. Wish it wasn't with Boston, but I'm not gonna play him. Like not for a little bit.
Yeah,
He's somebody who
I feel like in a situation like this, I'm curious to see what his mentality is, knowing that, okay, I wasn't the first choice. Hell, I wasn't even the second choice. Oh, ticket number 3. Now I'm getting called up. Like, what that does to him. Like, does that boom his mentality? Does that light a fire underneath him to prove himself that much more? It's really like a coin toss, because you have to imagine, like, that was probably eating him up, where he just kept getting looked over for other talent, despite the fact that, in the eyes of a lot of community members, they would have expected him a lot earlier than what we actually have seen here.
Yeah. I'm stoked he gets the opportunity, and hopefully it develops into a decent role either on Boston or somewhere else. I think it's just hard to be optimistic when you see how most of the acquisitions from Boston that aren't on other teams, aren't on other good teams, I would say, are doing. I love me some Blase, but Blase is on Houston, which isn't that much better, and then Aim God is on Washington, whereas Gamsu Note looking pretty good this weekend.
Yeah, and I was just looking at Bruce's high noon total for the week. So his top 3 total, which would be what they would use. I gotta scroll down even further. Hold on, I'm almost there. Oh, found it. 30.12.
Has not been good.
So to give you an idea, let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's bottom 10 of the week. That's pretty rough. But you know what? He outscored Fusions by 2.3 points.
Fusion's still on that team, dang. Yeah, it's there. I like Jerry. I'm okay with Myunbong. There's nobody on excuse me. There's nobody on Boston worth starting at all. Period.
No, not right now. And probably honestly, like for the rest of the season, like if we're being honest, like it's just been a rough patch where there's just so much going wrong with Boston this season, and it just seems like every week, you know, if we are seeing improvements, it's not really enough to keep pace with even the other bottom teams in the league so far.
Nah. I think the only things I could see, it depend for Jerry. It depends on how bad the other team he's playing is, and if they let Color Hex play heroes he's actually good at instead of May in every single comp, his Echo's okay. But if we got to see him on like the Pharah and the Widow, his like best heroes, he might put up some decent numbers. I don't know. I would stay far away, except for Jerry occasionally, and even then I would not be stoked.
Yeah, it's basically an all or nothing with Jerry. And unfortunately, more times than not, it has been more of a flop than anything. So I would just say avoid them outright altogether for the foreseeable future. Now that being said, we did have some pretty major news with the utter collapse of the runaway iteration of the Vancouver Titans. Now, you know, it's something that was heavily hinted at going into our last show, and it is official. They mutually parted ways with Haksel, Soaminsu, Slime, Stitch, Twilight, and Ryo-Jae-Han. They also released Fisher. And the Titans opted to kind of like build part of their core around one of the North American contenders teams, that being Second Wind. Now, there was a lot of talk about this. A lot of people kind of digging up dirt on Kaluj or Hagan, whatever, you know, moniker you want to refer to him as.
Apparently, the Florida Mayhem social media manager is responsible for how every Overwatch team makes decisions.
And there actually wasn't any talk between them, come to find out.
No. And even then, you go.
Which I thought, like, I wasn't surprised by, but what I really liked about that moment, regardless of if Antoine was trying to witch hunt someone, right, was the response from the Tier 2 community having Hagan's back in all of this. Like, that's not something, like, you expect to see from someone who in the past had a very bad reputation, but he's definitely turned things around, and I'm happy for him, but it was nice to see other people stepping up and voicing, you know, their opinions on how much he has changed since, like, the GOATS days. But anyways, when we look at Second Wind, the players that they moved up were Flex Support, Rolf, who had played on Team Canada prior. They signed their main tank, Shredlock, as well as DPS Dalton, who... Dalton has kind of always been this kid who has been on the outside looking in for, like, the U.S. World Cup team. I was like, okay, when's he going to get his shot, right?
Best known as Corey's DPS partner on Glad's Legion. Basically.
And Dalton had some pretty damn good moments over the weekend on the Tracer, especially. So, you know, potential for fantasies is there. But looking at the other signings, you have Karkar coming in as a main support. So someone who was on Fusion University, And then they moved to Korea. They got shat on. Karkar couldn't go to Korea because at the time under 18, so he couldn't like move over there and work there. And then he played for ATL Academy. They signed
R.I.P.
they signed KSA, who was on Young and Beautiful, as well as Raspberry Racers, as you had mentioned earlier, over in Contenders EU. And then the other DPS is Suna, who has been on a couple of the EU Academy teams back when there were more than one Academy team. Now it's just the British Hurricane, but he was on the Hurricane as well as Eternal Academy. So I'm sure you've been on social media over the weekend. A lot of the community has been pretty hard on the Titans. And, I don't understand it. Obviously, you need to set, like, modest expectations for a team that is just come together, has hardly had any sort of time to practice. You have KSA competed in Europe, so he's dealing with pain differences as well. But there's definitely growing pains, as is to be expected, but there were some actual notable fantasy outputs from the Vancouver Titans in week number 14. So, just looking at where they were, Dalton, and I'm looking at highnoon.gg, when I compare him to other DPS, Dalton is actually near the top out of week 14. In order for DPS, you have Nero, who had a top 3 total of 134.05, followed by Lip from the Shanghai Dragons at 129.19, and Dalton was third at 127.25. That's pretty damn respectable for someone who is just making his debut, playing with 3 new roster members essentially from his tier 2 team. Like, I didn't quite know what to expect from the team. And obviously, they got swept in one series, and I want to say the other one was 3-1. But even despite the sluggish start, we are seeing some production from this team. So even Rulf was up there too. Like, he had a top 3 of 189.5, which was third overall this week.
Now, the Titans played some pretty, except for the top 5 Florida Mayhem, except for the Titans known as the gargantuan giants known as the Mayhem. They did play the Justice, who kind of struggled in certain bits to play against them. Vancouver is really interesting because they play a very hyper-aggressive playstyle. You even saw them pulling out the old selfless spawn camp at certain points. And it seemed not at all that this team was bad, and more that there's a lot of communication and timing issues that need to be worked out. You saw stuff where they would, poor Suna got most of the critique about the Titans, the Teen Titans this weekend, was that Suna's EMPs just were not well coordinated, where he would throw an EMP, get one person, immediately die. Karkar's the only person who the main support has to go dive the one guy who got EMP'd. And that's stuff that comes with time. And I think community is a little bit split because on one hand, it's this huge victory for tier 2 Overwatch, getting to see all these players who deserve a shot finally get up there at the cost of seeing the most hallowed team in Overwatch history get disassembled. So I think people have hit this weird medium where you want the players to do well, but you still want the org to suffer for it. And I can't blame them. It would be like, if the Titans can just be close in games and not win, I'm all right with it. They're not going to do well in jersey sales, I imagine, for at least another year. As far as the actual stats go, the Titans are really intriguing to me because they have, coming up this week, they have a game against the Philadelphia Fusion, which don't start them for that game.
Yeah, that would be a brutal one.
The one I'm interested in is Saturday, noon Pacific. They play the Houston Outlaws. And I'm jumping on the Dalton train while he's cheap, because if there's anybody who can spectacularly fail and slip up on their face, I think it's going to be Houston. We waited so long for like, oh, who's gonna finally lose to the Shanghai Dragons? Like, oh no, the who's gonna lose to the Vancouver Titans narrative is going to be over very quickly. I think it's going to be Houston.
Yeah, and on that note, too, one of the things to remember about that Titans Justice series was that Justice were basically limping into that particular matchup where they had already lost like 10 plus straight maps. And you know, I remember watching like that first round on Control. I was hanging out in the high noon Discord, and Thorn Rain right after that first round, which went 199 by the way, in favor of the Titans. He's like, oh, tier 2 is better than Overwatch League, and I'm just like, that's not how that works. Like, so I feel like right now when you look at the Titans, they really feel like the boomer bust team. I feel like we're probably going to be in a situation where we kind of gotta let things situate for a week or two to really have a good gauge of where this team is going to be in the grand scheme of things. But seeing the potential that we saw out of Dalton this early on, it's very enticing to take him as one of your like lesser contracted options where, you know, you could go for a higher cost of DPS on the other side, like, I don't know, probably Lip being one of the more prominent figures in this current season just due to how the Dragons have been doing. But you know, for now, like, I would not shy away from starting Titans players, even if they are currently trying to get their feet underneath them. So I feel like the upswing potential for Rolf and for Dalton are a lot higher than, you know, potential new signees coming into the league on the Uprising or, you know, even the Justice at this point. So
I will say I would say that for Saturday against Houston, I wouldn't necessarily risk it against Philadelphia on Sunday.
mm-hmm.
Me personally, what do you think?
Yeah, just I feel like the Fusion have been pretty lights out, and sure, you know, they go to a map 5 pretty consistently. But if the execution just quite isn't there for the Titans, I don't know if there's enough willpower there in order to force the scraps to happen to the point where they could bring it to a map 5. So, you know, it's been either really good or really ugly, and in that situation, I would imagine it is more than likely going to be a 3-0 in favor of the Fusion in that particular match.
Yeah, I feel you, but I'm interested to see how they keep playing. How like once the team synergy develops, because the big part of this purchase as well was that they picked up a lot of Second Wind's coaching staff,
Mm-hmm.
and not only is it a staff that is familiar with half of those players, but the Second Wind team is very good at. For a long time, they were the team that got players ready for Overwatch League.
Right.
That you saw a lot of people, so I more mid tier players, if we're being honest, coming out of Second Win and kind of jumping into Overwatch League for a little bit. I'm 37, Gods, and who was God's tank partner? I can't even remember. And players along there. So I think we'll see. I think the Vancouver will do okay. I still think that they're going to be in that bottom third of teams, but they will at least be competitive in most matches.
Yeah, for fantasy, that could definitely take you quite a bit of ways. So looking ahead at week 15, the matchups, honestly, Ramses, were kind of like all over the place this week. I had a really hard time of kind of like narrowing down which ones we should kind of like hype up and do our pick'ems for the week, because there's some that I'm just like, you know, I could probably skip that one, and then a lot that are just kind of like, it's looking okay. But in week 15, we have Tracer, Mei, Orisa, and Moira out of the rotation. Now, you know, Dalton just popped up on Tracer.
Mm-hmm.
This could potentially be problematic, so I'm really anxious to see what tools he's going to pull out for this week. But looking at Saturday, we have an early game at 1 a.m. Pacific time between the Seoul Dynasty and the Chengdu Hunters. So it seems like, every week, we look at the Hunters and we're like, you know, it seems like every week this is a team that takes another step back. They did get swept by the London Spitfire, who were coming back from a 10-week hiatus, essentially. So seeing London back was pretty nice to see too. But unfortunately, they went one and then they kind of like ran into the charge. But at least they did manage to take a map off of them. So they were still kind of like the 50-50 Spitfire that we have seen even in the earlier parts of the season. But the Dynasty are a team that we're honestly still having a hard time getting a read on them. Because this past weekend, they only had one match, and they were going up against the Shanghai Dragons in a series that went to a map 5, and the Dynasty actually came out ahead in that one.
Now, there were a lot of double shield maps in there that fit their playstyle
This
a
is true.
lot. And the APAC carousel has been very frustrating to be invested in because it feels like it's a trade for whoever's going to actually be good this week, except for Shanghai. So I also think it's worth it to mention hero pools have really stifled Chengdu to where there's no more like chaotic frenzied style to them where they make you play their pace. It just kind of seems like they're trying to hang in every single match and they're just trying to keep up. So I am not confident in Chengdu for this one. I know you're the Seoul Dynasty fan out of the both of us. I would imagine you're feeling good, Seoul, but
I think the Hunters are gonna have another 0-2 week again. Like, this is a team, like, they just can't really throw those wacky compositions at their opposition anymore to kind of catch players off guard. So, this past season, this was always a team who would kind of like do the unexpected in regards to like, okay, like we're used to seeing them just run like these Pharah dive compositions, and then they just shy away from it, and then they run like double barrier, which is not something that you would expect from them. And then they did relatively okay at that. They kind of kept teams off of their toes. But, they were in a similar position to the Dragons were this past season, where prior to the Rollock and 2-2-2, they would often run these triple DPS compositions. And while the Dragons have kind of like exceeded and pushed through those barriers, you have the Hunters who are still not able to really piece everything together. So I'm pretty confident even if we don't see a ton of double barrier now that, Orisa is out of the rotation this week, that the Dynasties should be able to take it. But it's just one of those instances where right now we continue to see that circle of parity within Asia. But the Hunters always seem to be on the wrong end of the circle. So no matter what side you're going, the Hunters are always in the back. And until something changes, and at this point, Ramses, I feel like for the Hunters, it's too little too late.
I definitely agree. I am not stoked on picking Chengdu for this week, which is a bummer. I like so many of these players. I wanted Leave to come out and be able to flex his crazy hero pool, which they just haven't. They haven't had, I guess, the dynamicness or the punch that they were able to kind of pull out this year. So
yeah, and this is a team who have only won 2 maps in their past 5 matches.
Yeah,
it's definitely rough. Now, then again, like, Asia in itself has been rough, not just making pickups, but also just trying to get a good read off of, who the elite teams are, just because there has been a lot of trade-in back and forth due to that circle of parity that we have been talking about. So, moving into the NA side, Saturday at 12 p.m. Pacific time, as you had noted to earlier, we have the Vancouver Titans going up against the Houston Outlaws. So, again, it's really early on for the Titans. A little bit of sloppy play. And I'm looking at the schedule. I want to see if they play two. Okay, they do play 2 games. I remember because you mentioned they faced the Fusion as well this week. So I, I feel like this is more of a trap game just because. Or maybe it won't be because they're like, okay, we'll probably lose to the Fusion. Do they go all in on the Outlaws here for their prep, or are they just going to prepare similar lineups for both of these matches this weekend?
I Well, they have to run one lineup. They have 6 people.
I
If
mean, that
they, as
is
far
true.
as when they, I think we're gonna see the Cree. I think we're gonna see a lot of the McCree out of them, and the reason why I'm not bullish on Houston is, unfortunately, Moira out. This is hoping that they put Repel in along with Jexay, because Repel and Jexay is infinitely better than Raucus Jexay. I'm sorry, my boy, but Dante can't carry this team. As much as as much as he's trying his heart out, as much as I love him for trying, and you take away Dante with Tracer, his Sombra is great, but I don't think Sombra's going to have the same impact.
Mm-hmm.
And say what you want about the Titans having low, I guess, like low synergy. I just don't think Houston's going to be able to compete. I really close. I don't think Houston's going to win. I think he loses 3-2.
Interesting.
It's a bummer take, but it I saw a point somebody made that I kind of identified with, that we talk about how like Philly is like the most clutch team in the league, where like when the chips
Mm-hmm.
are down and you have to win that fight, like they are the people, like they're super super good. They step up to the plate. Houston, it feels like, all right, we need to win this fight to win the game, and then it all just falls away.
Yeah, the chips are knocked off the table.
Yeah,
They,
but we might see Chipsa this week play against the Vancouver Titans if Christopher is to
you,
be believed.
you know what? They keep saying, "Oh yeah, this is gonna be the week." They're just memeing. I don't think it's ever going to happen. But never say never.
Somebody made the point like how it's a master class like tactic in like manipulation, because if you're Philly, you just keep teasing you're gonna play Chipsa, and they have to practice against the Doomfist, to practice the anti Doomfist comp, and then
Mm-hmm.
Chipsa just sits, and then they waste all that practice time for nothing.
Yeah, I feel like since Houston is entering this, and this is their only match for the week, I do agree with you. I think this will be a close series. I feel like it really boils down to whether or not the Outlaws can figure out how to deal with the aggression coming out of the Titans. So it's gonna be a matter of whether or not that they could adapt to that. I am gonna favor Houston in this. I do agree this one is more than likely gonna go the distance. But if you're the Titans, you had to be feeling like you have a lot to prove at this point. It's kind of like unprecedented having to come in and replace what was one of the most beloved teams in Overwatch history prior to the Overwatch League. Those are pretty damn big shoes to fill. But I was happy to see at least that the Titans fan base, for the most part, was pretty accepting of the new team. So that was good to see. So moving ahead into Sunday at 3 a.m. Pacific time, we got the Hangzhou Spark going up against the London Spitfire. So this is another interesting one. You have the Spark, who have definitely been like making some tweaks to like their starting lineup with their off tank. Bebe has been pretty lights out across the board, fantasy wise, kind of like throughout the season. And then London, this has been a team that's been pretty 50-50 so far, and we really haven't seen them going up against all of the competition so far in regards to Asia. So London, they open a week against Shanghai, so probably going to be a loss just based off of what we have seen from them, but we haven't seen them going up against Hanzhou here yet this season. So, how are you feeling about this one? Because this one to me feels like it is more of a coin toss over some of the other games that we'll be talking about.
I think it's really tempting to go with Hangzhou here, and that's the easy. London has some potential here, especially Glister. I could very much go in which London they have a surprise ability, and I've said it a couple times that Glister and Bernard are just carry this team behind them,
Mm-hmm.
and sure Tracer's out of the. I don't see anywhere that is. I don't see bands that are going to specifically hurt London. I could, for the sake of fun and variety, I'm thinking London to win this game. What about you?
You know, I feel like I'm backed into a corner here, just because Ed and I have a bet about who's better between London and Boston, where I'm in a
Oh,
situation where I have to always pick London because they are the team that I am back in, and you know, I keep telling Ed like, hey, like Boston's playing a lot. They're also losing a lot, and he's like, "Oh well, you know, we haven't seen London in 10 weeks. I'm pretty sure London is still going to come out
Edward.
ahead."
I have that. I have a bet with the Bosco that if London makes it into 10th place or higher, I own a jersey. So
Is that at any point during the season, or are we talking at the end of
if
the
they
season?
finish the season
Okay,
10th place or higher,
gotcha. I think that's doable. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, even like looking at it right now, yes, they even if they go 50-50, they still have pretty good shots of doing that just because of how stacked like the middle of the pack is so far. I mean, even right now, you know, they're 4-3. They're I think really only like a couple of maps behind the Dynasty at this point, but they're currently in 7th overall. So as long as they keep pace, they should be able to do it. But Hanzhou has been another 50-50 team in Asia. And, you know, that's what is so frustrating about this region is if everyone is able to beat the other, and Shanghai just keeps beating everyone, like, how can you even decide who is going to edge out in the middle of the pack if everyone is going 50-50? You know, like, that is really the toughest thing to do analysis on because on any given week, it seems like Hydra can beat London, London can beat Hangzhou, and then Chengdu just can't keep up. Like, those are the
yeah,
constant things, and it's just like, I, I don't even know. Like, I feel like we've seen Hangzhou a lot more. And London looked better than what I was expecting them to after not seeing any play for 10 weeks. And at this point, I don't know if the Spark have progressed along far enough to match up with London. So I'm going to give the nod to London. I think this one is probably... I don't know if this one would be a map 5. I'd probably say 3-1 for this one in favor of the Spitfire. Just so London can continue to climb and, you know, just keep pushing Boston further and further down, which they can't do because they're already 20th.
yeah, I agree. I think you got an easy bet out of that one.
Well, I mean, not everyone can have a 9.1% win rate in the Overwatch League this season, like Boston. Oof, that hurts. You know it's bad when Boston almost has as many map losses as the 18th and the 19th team combined. There's only
At some
a
point,
one map differential.
what I don't get is how how much money is Boston making from Huck? Like, because if you're a GM, you're either supposed to be bringing in the best talent, or to make money for the team with your talent,
Mhm.
and they've. Well, I don't know if this current crop of players is going to be like picked up by other teams come next year. Like I don't. Myunbong might, Jerry might. I don't see a world in which in which teams are racing to pick Halo or they're racing to pick up Color Hex
Hmm.
anymore.
Yeah, it's definitely been pretty rough, and even like following the Dragons, inaugural season, there really weren't a lot of moving pieces there getting picked up either. So looks like that could mirror what we are going to see from Boston later on in the
Mm.
season and going into the off season. So the last match I want to talk about is the one on Sunday at noon Pacific time. We have the Dallas Fuel going up against the Paris Eternal. And like part of me every week is like, man, I like everything about Dallas. And then, support lineup's like, it's okay. And then Crimso has been
The fantasy
like
superstar.
the superstar of fantasy, essentially. He's been like the staple piece. So it's just like, I like most of the pieces on this team. And, from a fantasy perspective, Crimso has been absolutely lights out. But I feel like if we're talking about the overall team and how they've been faring in the league, like this is a team that is just steadily in the middle. There's a lot of like potential for this team, especially due to, their front line as well as their DPS line. But it just seems like at this point, Dallas is kind of middled out. Whereas with a team like Paris, we've seen. I feel like we've gone through the three stages of grief with Paris at this point. We've seen them at their very best with XC popping off on the McCree. We've seen them just lose into teams that they shouldn't lose to. And then there's other weeks where they can easily force them at 5. So it's just like we've seen production for quite some time from this team, especially in fantasy too. But it's just kind of like at this point now where I just come to expect more out of Paris, but I'm still going to rely on Crimso for fantasy Overwatch League. So I'm torn. Like, I want Dallas to always put up enough of a fight just so Crimso can continue to put up these 160 plus point weeks in high noon. But it just seems like every time I want to tip Dallas, they end up biting me in the ass, and then I just find myself that much further behind in the leaderboards. And, at some point, something is going to have to give. So, based off of what we've seen, I do feel more confident in Paris. But, man, like, it's not going to make me stop pulling for Crimso.
So I think Dallas is going to win this because XC's not back yet. I think we would have heard if XC is back with the Paris Eternal. He's still in Korea. Tracer's banned.
Mm-hmm.
And May's banned. So I think that means Nico is only playing the Echo. What is Soon going to play? Because Decay can play some other heroes. And Doha is going to be fine as far as other heroes to play. I really don't know what you do with Soon at that point.
Right.
And granted, No Smites looked pretty good on the Monkey recently. And Fielder's been great. So I don't know. Like, I'm feeling more Dallas in this one just because I think they're going to be less negatively affected by the hero pool.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up the stats lab just so I can get an idea of what Soon has been playing. At least this season. That doesn't help. Yeah, but Soon, it's so hard to say. Like, I feel like even without XE, this team has still been fairly middling. But they've still been putting up numbers fantasy-wise. Of course, StatsLab just takes forever to load. This is the problem with the format they have, unfortunately. But just looking at like the recent performances, unfortunately, like for Paris, they've had a bit of a rough stretch. They've face Fusion twice here in the past 5 games. They also went up against the top-seeded Florida Mayhem here in Week 11, but they did just come off of a win against the LA Gladiators, who are another team that has had a lot of, like, DPS potential. So I feel like the Gladiators are in a similar situation to where the Fuel are at right now, where I feel like the Gladiators might be a more complete team, but maybe they just have a little bit less pop-off potential on the DPS line. So I feel like just with how that series went, I'm still going to lean in favor of the Eternal. But, you know, like, Dallas needs to beat better teams. Essentially is what it comes down to. Because we've seen them lose to the Fusion, we've seen them lose to the Shock, and then what? They've swept the Justice twice. They took the Outlaws to a map 5 here in recent weeks. A lot of these wins are against teams that are in the lower half of the league. I think that really the only exception at the time might have been like the Valiant series, which also went to a map 5 that the Fuel won. So it seems like every time that you have the Fuel in these situations where they're going up against a better team, they end up losing. They might go 4 or 5 maps, but ultimately they end up falling. So I'm still feeling pretty confident in the Eternal here.
Understandable. I wouldn't fault you for it.
But, you know, with that said, Ramses, is there anything else you want to note fantasy-wise? Whether, you know, it is people to keep an eye on contract-wise for daily or draft reel, anything in particular there?
If you're doing fantasy OWL, Crimzo is my consistent, like, whenever they ask you who to put the double point booster on, I'm putting it on Crimzo every single time.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, I've gotten 300, 400, and this week I got 530 points off of him for one day's games. So I am riding the Crimzo train as far as double points as much as I can. Other than that, scores have been a little bit more stable. If anything, this Dragon score is a little bit more disappointing. I know almost all of us picked Void because Void's been like one of the best off tanks, and then Void didn't even make 100 points this week. So it's hard to have sure things so far in fantasy Overwatch, but Crimzo for me, as I'm cursing it right now, is the closest thing I have.
So out of those 530 points, what would you say the percentage of your total points that was for your team? Was that like half?
Half, more than half. Yeah, because I got like what 930 or something, and then yeah,
that's pretty respectable.
The Crimzo will carry where Zachary cannot.
Well, I mean, Zachary actually has to play in order to get points, so
true.
There is that too. Oh well, who knows? Maybe he'll see more play in Valorant. Maybe not.
I can't wait till he complains and whines in that game too.
Yep, then we'll move on to the next project. Whatever that will end up being. But anyways, let's go ahead and let's close out the shop for tonight. So if you guys want to help us out, please do us a favor and head over to iTunes and leave us a review. Unlike Ed, I'm not going to threaten you or anything like that. It didn't work, by the way. We don't have any new reviews. So that definitely didn't work, Ed. So, yeah. But anyways, we are always looking for feedback on the show. Let us know what you guys like, what you don't like. If you'd like to see us incorporate anything else. I know it's been kind of like wonky, and you know, part of that, at least covering Fantasy Overwatch League this season, is the scoring hasn't been mirrored in the sense that each platform tends to have different scoring. So the top scorers are different across all platforms, and it's really hard to like pick and pull from like what we are actually trying to cover. So that's why we do hop around quite a bit. So please keep that in mind. So yeah, just let us know how you're feeling about the show, and we'll definitely read it on the next episode after it's posted over on iTunes or whatever other podcatcher you are using where we could actually gather reviews from. Now, that being said, I do want to preface this with Overwatch Recall. I am 2 weeks behind. I've had a lot of projects that I've been buried in. I'm hoping to get to update in the weekly recall for the past 2 weeks tomorrow. So I apologies for that. There's just so much stuff going on. But anyways, Ramses, there is at least one part of recall that is up to date, and that is the podcast directory. So why don't you go ahead and tell them all about that at least?
So you can find a listing of several Overwatch League, and Path to Pro podcast over on our website at owlendshow.com/OW And it's each week we release a full set of episodic listings for every single Overwatch podcast that's out there. Even ones that aren't even active anymore, we still keep those in solid memory. If you want to keep up to date with the podcast scene for Overwatch, just follow us at Overwatch Recall on Twitter, which is at OW Recall. And if you want to get in our daily debates and discussions that we have in the Discord, I know Ed, my totem, and I are all pretty frequent in there. And you can find us over on the Owl Network. I am just a mess of words today. I'm sorry. On the Overwatch League Network Discord.
Mm-hmm.
Did I skip that? No.
Yeah, we'll just go back. It's fine.
Well, no. Because the Discord thing isn't in here. So you can find us on the Discord at discord.me/OWL Network. If you want to directly support the show, that's what I meant to say. We invite you to consider showing some additional support through our Patreon, which keeps the lights on around here, make things easier, pays for hosting costs. And you can find more information about that at patreon.com/OWL Network. Tiers start just $1 a month, so it's super easy to help out. And if you help out, you can join the likes of our master and above patrons like Daniel, Owl, Kesha, Agent Life, and 044 in helping our network grow. And then Totem, you have our contact info for this week.
I do. We're not just going to trip ahead. Or at least I won't. I can email us at contact@owlnshow.com. So follow us over on Twitter at OWL by the numbers. Our website, which I also need to update, so I did preface that, at owlnshow.com. I can also find all of our podcast content, and every once in a blue moon, whenever Spider decides to come out from the abyss, and then his video stuff doesn't get corrupted, you can find all the content there at youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. And of course, as you mentioned, we do have our community Discord, where you can, find us randomly trolling people, all that good stuff, and talking all things Overwatch and or Overwatch League, and the occasional goofy movie tirades at discord.me/OWLNshow. And we do stream fairly regularly over on Twitch, so we are a Twitch affiliate, so please help support the show by subbing to our channel and earn our network emoticon. We do stream fairly regularly, running shows Monday through Wednesday, so Monday nights, we have Overwatch League Network that is at 7 p.m. Pacific Time. OWL by the numbers, which is this show, airs Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific Time. And then on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific Time, we have our variety Overwatch show, that being Heroes Never Die. And I have a feeling we are going to have a lot to talk about tomorrow in particular. A lot of stuff happening, whether it's the leaks for the anniversary events, or they're suddenly being 2 ranked queues because people are playing open rank queue for some reason. I don't know. It confuses me.
DPS players are playing open rank queue.
Basically. But yeah. Wednesdays, 5 p.m. Pacific Time for Heroes Never Die. And then Editor and myself have both been doing Tavern Tales, which is a Hearthstone Battlegrounds podcast, which airs Thursdays at 5 p.m. Pacific Time over at twitch.tv/TavernTalesHS. Which, by the way, guys, if you play Hearthstone, and if you play Battlegrounds, there was a balance update that dropped today. We have a new beast minion that gets buffed whenever you play Death Rattles. We got 3 new heroes, so we'll definitely be deep diving into that. And I also have a new project that was recently released called Handle with Scare, which is all about scary movies, which I'm doing with my partner in crime, Vashti. So you can find that on all major podcatchers and all of that good stuff. Whew, now that we got that out of the way, you can contact our host via social media, primarily on Twitter. So you can find Editar at Editar83. You can find Blazin' Bob or Boomer Bob, depending on whether or not he knows that a Goofy movie is actually a movie and not randomly
Yeah.
bringing up Jay and Silent Bob.
We told him we were going to watch
By the way, he didn't even use the right title for the movie that he was mentioning in the first place. It's Jay and Silent Bob reboot for one, Bob. Like, come on, you boomer.
My favorite was that we were talking. So we're going to be celebrating Ed's birthday this weekend. It is Ed Nar's birthday, so please tweet him or wish him a happy birthday whenever you hear this. And Ed was talking about wanting to do a Goofy movie watch along over Discord, and Bob does not know that there is a movie about the Disney character Goofy. He just thought we were talking about that Ed wanted to watch a movie that was Goofy.
Mm-hmm.
So it was one of the funniest moments I've ever had with these guys. But yeah, Boomer Bob, BLAZZIN _BOB.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so make sure you go make fun of Bob for that. As for myself, Totally Drunk, you can find me on Twitter at TotallyDrunkCTR, and I do stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/TotallyDrunk. But Ramses, how can our listeners get a hold of you, sir?
You can find me on Twitter at Ramses_OW, and you can find the other show I do at PushPointPod.
All right, so with that being said, guys, we do appreciate you guys for stopping by for another episode of OWL by the numbers. This has been episode 47, and we will see you guys back tomorrow night as we deep dive into all of the patch goodness on Heroes Never Die. We'll see you then.